The busy city of Nairobi pulsed with so much life as the sun set, casting long shadows over the city. The aroma of street food mingled with the evening breeze, and the sounds of vendors selling food and other things on the streets filled the air. In the heart of this city was Detective Amina Okello, who navigated through the crowds of people, her mind focused on the case that had consumed her thoughts for so many weeks. A series of high-profile jewel heists had left the city's elite in a state of panic. Everyone was afraid. The latest victim of this theft was none other than Kofi Adama, a wealthy entrepreneur with a very mysterious life. Amina had her suspicions about Kofi, and his charm and success masked a world of secrets. She worked side by side with her partner, Inspector Mwangi, who was known for his want for justice, his dedication to bring criminals to justice. That evening, as they approached Kofi's luxurious villa, Mwangi's eyes were sharp and determined. Mwangi never thought that this guy Kofi was a good guy at all. He said to himself, "This guy knows more than he's even letting on." Amina nodded her head in agreement as she knocked on the door. Within seconds, Kofi appeared, his presence as magnetic as ever. "Detectives," he greeted them with a warm smile. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" "We had a few questions about the night of the robbery," Amina replied, trying to maintain a very professional demeanor. "Of course," Kofi said, stepping aside and letting them into his beautiful home. "Please make yourselves comfortable." The villa's interior decor was a complete difference from what the chaotic streets looked like outside. It exuded elegance with modern African art adorning the walls and the soft lighting creating an intimate atmosphere. Amina looked around, her eyes wandering, taking in the details of everything she saw, while Kofi poured 3 glasses of wine. "Join me," he offered, handing them each a glass. "Thank you," Amina said, accepting it reluctantly. "Mr. Adama, can you tell us if you noticed anything unusual that night? Anything at all that can help us find the culprits of the robbery?" Kofi leaned back, his gaze locking onto hers. There was tension in the air. "Please, call me Kofi. And as I told you before, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But perhaps there's something else we could discuss?" Amina felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. She knew she could keep her distance from him, yet there was something compelling about him, something undeniably beautiful and endearing. She took a sip of her wine, hoping to buy herself a moment to collect her thoughts and pull herself together. "Kofi, this is serious," she said, trying to steer the conversation back on track. "If you know anything, now is the time to tell us. We're only here to help, I promise you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Amina, there's more to this than you realize. These thieves, they're not just after the jewels. There's a network, deeper and dangerous, more dangerous than you can ever imagine." Amina's heart raced. "What do you know about the network?" Kofi hesitated, glancing around as if fearing that someone else could overhear them. He looked at Mwangi, who was busy sipping his wine while also looking at Kofi suspiciously. Kofi stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. Amina tried to protest, but he said no. That was the end of the conversation. As they prepared to leave, Kofi shook Mwangi's hand firmly. When he reached out for Amina's hand, he slid the note into her palm so discreetly that Mwangi didn't even notice. Once they got outside, Mwangi shook his head and said, "That guy is hiding something, but I will get to the bottom of it. Trust me, Amina, I never disappoint." Amina remained silent, her mind preoccupied with the note burning in her hand. Later, alone in her apartment, she unfolded the paper and read Kofi's message. It said, "Meet me tomorrow at Karura Forest near the waterfall. I'll explain everything. Trust no one." Amina was confused. Why didn't he say this to her in front of Mwangi? This continued to ponder in her mind. The next morning, Amina found herself at the edge of the Karura forest. She followed the path towards the waterfall, her steps quickening with every passing moment. As the roar of the waterfall grew louder, she spotted Kofi standing by the water's edge. His posture was tense. She scanned him from head to toe. She couldn't understand how a man could be so handsome, his eyes brown like honey, and his posture just perfect. When he saw her, a hint of relief crossed his face. "Amina," he greeted her, his voice barely audible over the cascading water. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't have a choice," she replied, trying to mask her anxiety and lost with a firm tone. "You said you had information." Kofi nodded his head and motioned for her to follow him to a secluded part far away from the main part of Karura Forest. Once they were out of sight, he began to speak. "The network I mentioned is real, Amina. It's an international syndicate involved in trafficking stolen artifacts and jewels. They've been operating under the radar for years, and their reach extends beyond Kenya." "Then why haven't you reported this to the authorities?" Amina asked suspiciously. "Because they have people everywhere in the police force. Everywhere you go, you would find them. Even within law enforcement, I've been gathering evidence, but I couldn't trust anyone. Well, until I met you." Amina looked at him, her heart skipped a bit. "Why me?" He responded, "Because you're different. You care about justice, not just for the rich and powerful, but for everyone. I've seen the cases you've worked on, the risks you have taken. I knew you were the only one I could trust." She wanted to believe him, but the stakes were too high. "What kind of evidence do you have?" she asked, looking at him from head to toe. Kofi pulled out a small flash drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "Everything you need is on this drive. Names, locations, transactions. But be careful. If they find out that you have this, your life will be in danger." Amina took the drive, feeling its weight in her hand. "Why are you risking so much to help me?" she asked him. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and something deeper, something he couldn't even understand. "Because I've lost too much already. And because I believe in you," he said. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the forest. Kofi's expression turned to one of alarm. "We need to go now!" They hurried back towards the main path, but it was too late. A group of men armed with guns and machetes blocked their way. Amina's hand instinctively reached for her gun, but Kofi grabbed her arm. One of the men stepped forward, a cold smile on his face. "Mr. Adama, you've been a thorn on our side for far too long, and now it seems like you've dragged the good detective into your mess." Amina's heart raced, searching for a way out. "Let him go! He's not the one you want," she said. The man laughed. "Oh, But he is, and now, so are you. Without warning, Kofi lunged at the man, knocking him off balance. "Run, Amina!" he shouted. She hesitated for a split second, confused, before finally sprinting into the dense forest, running with her heels touching her head, the sound of the struggle fading behind her. She didn't look back, focusing only on the path ahead and the precious drive in her pocket. As she emerged from the forest back into the city, Amina knew the fight was far from over. The syndicate was vast and powerful. How did they know about their meeting point? She kept asking herself. But with Kofi's evidence, she had the chance to bring them down and maybe, just maybe, save the man who had risked everything to trust her. Amina returned to the office, the flash drive hidden safely in her jacket. She needed to decrypt it and find a way to bring the evidence to light without alerting the syndicate. But first, she had to confront Mwangi to see if he truly was as trustworthy as he had once believed. She found Mwangi in his office, going over case files. He had a face cap and glasses, dark glasses over his eyes. "Mwangi, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. He looked up, concerned. "What's wrong, Amina?" His voice sounded a little different, almost like he had a cold. Amina hesitated and asked him, "What's wrong with your voice?" Mwangi told her that he had gotten the flu the night before and his voice had been affected. He asked again, "What's wrong, Amina?" Amina handed him the flash drive and said, "Kofi gave this to me. It contains evidence about the syndicate, but he said not to trust anyone." Mwangi took the drive, examining it closely. "You did the right thing bringing this to me. We'll get to the bottom of this together. We're partners, remember?"